We are, okay. So hopefully you can see that we're recording this session, so. Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here this morning. I wish I was set up outside because it's beautiful. And we are excited about our opportunity here this morning to talk about the high school process. And so without further ado, I've welcomed everyone as a group, but I want to say a special welcome to our parents who have either just experienced the high school application process, or they experienced it just in recent memory, or they've done both. So we have Gretchen Hurt with us here today. Gretchen, just give a wave. We have Gretchen Hurt. We have Brian Smallwood who's here. We have Danielle Cummings who's with us this morning. Real wave, Danielle. And Danielle, you're frozen a little bit to us, so hopefully we can hear your voice. Judith Delane is with us this morning. And while she has a 7th grader, she also has a current freshman in high school. And then Taylor Cameron is here visiting with us this morning. Give a wave, Taylor.
Good morning.
I will give them the opportunity to tell you what grade levels the kids are in. And also, we're going to kick this off with them sharing something that they think is particularly interesting or important, or something that was that impacted them in their high school process with their kids. I know that we have other parents here who have also experienced that. There'll be time later for you to share your experiences, because that's what this forum is for people to learn, for us to learn from each other. So we'll get started with Gretchen, if you don't mind.
Good morning. I hope everyone can hear me. That working okay, Jill? So I have an 8th grader, Gibson, and a 10th grader, Liam, who went through the process a few years ago. And I think, the two main things I wanted to share with parents who might be approaching this for the first time. One is that the St. Anne's network is great. St. Anne's will have a timeline for you. They've got panels with schools coming in and setting up and offering information sessions right on campus. And then, of course, you've got this network of parents, parents of older students who are happy to talk to you, on the sidelines of games or receive a call. So I would say activate that for sure. Everybody's really happy to talk about it and share ideas. And then the second thing in a search process that's got to be key really is going to see the places you're thinking about. So any schools you're seriously considering, set up that visit, be there on campus, soak up the atmosphere, meet teachers, and ask questions. I think it's a really irreplaceable part of the process. You'll learn a lot about what you're looking for, and you'll learn what you're not looking for. So those are my two main things, and I'm happy to be here today, even though we're virtual. So feel free to send the questions my way.
Can't get my mic. Fighting with my mic. That seems to be a common thing these days. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you very much for sharing those things. I think we'll just go ahead and follow the order that's in the agenda. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind going next, that'd be great.
How about now? I got you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, just to reiterate what Gretchen said, the St. Anne's network is definitely a great tool. The high school events that they host were definitely a great start. I think for us, doing a lot of the tours and then actually narrowing down, picking which schools would be a shadow day process were key as well. And it really narrowed down the kids' choices as well. I think for us, we have Corey as an 8th grader at St. Anne's. Our older son, Dylan, is a sophomore. For two kids that have two slightly different personalities, our older son was extremely athletic. He was chasing athletic decisions over academics. So that was also part of the process, is to try to get them to focus on the academic side of it, as opposed to just trying to go to a school that might have an excellent sport or team. So there were the things that really stood out for us.
Okay, thanks. And so we'll slide to Danielle Cummins.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to let you know that there are two things that I thought were kind of important for this process. I have an 8th grader, Emmy, and her choices were very varied. So what I would say is let your child drive the experience, which is kind of difficult. Meaning let them look into the schools and get the information from the schools and choose where they want to look further into with shadow days. But when it comes into the process, you really have to drive the process. So while they may say, these are the schools I want to visit and these are the schools I want to look more into, as a parent, it can quickly slip away from you if you don't stay in front of the process and maybe get those shadow days scheduled earlier than later, because when it comes down to the end game, it's a very tight window for many of the schools, and it can get really hairy when you have athletes who are trying to play sports and put applications in and apply for scholarships, and then there's the financial aid. So I would venture to say, if you can lay off the reins in the summer and have them look into the various schools a little bit, and then pull it back in towards the end of the fall, it would be very helpful. And please know, as the registrar, I'm happy to help you through that process. That's it.
Okay, great, thank you. And Judith.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Judith Delane. I have a 7th grader, Alonzo Delane, the third, and I also have a freshman, Jameson Delane. And what I found for Jameson is, I will also mirror what Danielle said, really let the child kind of decide what their high school experience is, but you're in the background guiding it. What I found also is that when they do their research, you have to also be comfortable with some of the decisions they're making, and understand those deadlines vary for each school, whether you're looking into public, charter, private. So you really need to look at your time frame and map out how you want to do your visits, schedule your meetings, your interviews, your shadow days, because it is a lot of work. It was a tremendous amount of work, and I'm glad that we have the first one in high school, because I know what to do now for the second child that's coming out soon. But you really need to map out where you want to go, narrow down your schools as much as possible, start in 7th grade. I already have Alonzo looking at what he might want to do, where he might want to go, so that we can start narrowing down to certain schools. And then the family has to feel comfortable with the final decision. The child will feel comfortable, but it's really a family decision, because how is it going to affect the entire family? And that's what I took away from this process. And just be ready to complete a lot of paperwork. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judith, and thanks for waiting. And last but not least for this part of it is Taylor Cameron.
Hi, good morning. I would say that we have two children, one who's actually out of high school now, and our son who is a senior. And for our son who was a senior, I think his process was maybe a little unique in that he decided after his freshman year to switch schools. So I guess, that just simply goes to say that, you can go through the process and it can be great. And then you can make a change. There is the opportunity to make a change, and not that it's a process that you want to go through multiple times with each child, but I think, our son, he found a school that he was very interested in when he was in that initial process in 8th grade, and it was the absolute right choice. It was a day school, and he had thought about maybe going into boarding school, but it wasn't something he was ready for, and it was the absolute right choice. It gave him that extra year of maturity, and it was good for him. And then he did kind of go through the application process again, and made a switch. I would echo some of the things that Gretchen and Danielle and Judith all said, specifically about visiting these places. Your kids need to be able to imagine themselves there. It's really hard to get a sense of the school culture from the literature, from their flyers. They all sound amazing and look gorgeous, and they all put their best foot forward in their published materials and their websites and everything else. But when you go there, you can get a sense of it. With my daughter, we visited basically 2 schools. She knew she wanted to go away, so we kind of set the parameters of what would work for her, and that worked. And then for my son, he visited like 6 or 7, so it was a different process for both of them. To also talk about, sort of reiterate what Danielle said, start early. You can't start early enough to sort of give your kids time and space to think about it. Let your kids drive it. I was kind of surprised that my son decided to go the day school route instead of the boarding school route initially, but we trusted him, and it was absolutely the right decision. I'm so glad he did that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I probably should have said this before, but let's assume in this setting, anything goes and anything's right. As you've heard, our parents represent lots of different kinds of schools. Their kids applied to lots of different kinds of schools, and they've ended up, we have boarding schools, day schools, public school, charter school. And they will, some people may have looked at single sex schools. We have other folks that are online here that have had experiences also. So if you have questions, don't feel like you have to limit your questions here. Just put it out there. And if we don't know the answer, or I don't know the answer, or someone in this setting doesn't know, we'll find out what it is and we'll get it to you. 3 pieces of information before we open up and have questions and move into discussion, a little bit more discussion. One is I'm about to link a PDF that lists. So normally we would have had the high school fair on Wednesday, and you would have been able to come in with your students and with your child and go through and talk to people. And because of the circumstances, we couldn't do that. So in lieu of that, and I do understand that it's not a perfect solution, but for right now, what we have is it's a PDF document that has schools listed by type, like boarding school, day school, public school, and it has links to the school's websites that will get you there. In some cases, they're general, just their basic landing page, homepage, and in some cases, their admissions page or something like that. We're hoping that this will help your child. It will give them a confined space to start from if they haven't already started, or if they've already started, something that they can go through maybe as a checklist. It's not all inclusive, but it has a lot of schools on there. So, and it lists the list. So I'm in the chat right now. I'm going to link it. So high school list. So there it is right now. I'll also include it in the letter my letter that comes out on Tuesdays. I'll also put it in that letter. The link will be there, so you don't have to worry about it. But you can go, if you're not sure, the chat bubble is up in the right-hand corner. It looks like a little chat box, or a little chat box and chat go right together. Little comment bubble that's up there, so you should be able to get it. And so I'll post it again, and I'll include it in a letter. So that's one thing. Hopefully that will be a help to you. Another thing that would have happened soon, actually, not this week, not this coming week, but the next week, is that we would have had the Mid-Atlantic boarding school group, about the 5 admissions representatives would have visited our school. They would have talked to parents in the morning and then had a session with our 7th graders that they just talk about. They're not selling boarding school. They would have been talking about the admissions process, and that process applies across all schools. They also would have had done mock interviews with the kids in small groups. They would have been able to go through. So we're trying to address that in 2 ways. One is the MABS group, the Mid-Atlantic Boarding School. MABS is making a video that provides information that you as parents would have gotten, and also your student. That should be ready here in a couple weeks. So I'll be able to share that out with families. And then secondly, to address the mock interviews, because they can't come in and do that now, we're setting up a time in the fall for those folks to come in so that we can do mock interviews early in September with our 7th graders, so they'll have that experience. So we're going to meet those needs in those 2 ways. I'll also include that in my letter, so you don't have to remember. And the third piece of information has to do with the visits that everyone has mentioned that that I just want to take note, is that your student can visit as many schools as they like, and those are all excused absences depending on when school. I don't want you to think that there's no cost to that, except for that your student misses class. And that's part of the process. That's part of life. That's part of them understanding that there's only so much time in the day and you have to trade. So you have to trade off for those things. So I want you to know, we will make some suggestions about good dates for those to happen, because the fact of the matter is that some kids can get kind of anxious about missing class and missing homework and that kind of thing. But we try to make that as easy as possible for you and for them. And really the most important thing about that is just for them to communicate with their teachers and their advisors, because we have that support system in their life that will help them with it. So that was the only thing I wanted to say about that. So let's see. We have some questions in the chat box. You can also unmute if you want to and ask a question. Might be easier if you have a question to go ahead and say, hey, I have a question and I'd like to ask it, and we can go through there and I'll moderate these. So we had a question earlier from Lori Housey that said, Gretchen, did your kids choose the same school? And Gretchen, I don't know, do you want to add more to what you wrote here? Or do you want me to just read it? Just slide your cursor down to the bottom of the screen. Your mic should pop
Yeah,
up.
finally. This is a new platform for me. I've used Blue Jeans, I've used Zoom, but not this one. Yeah, I also, so my boys are both at St. Andrews where I teach. So if they did go through a full process, we visited other boarding schools, different schools for each boy, and they did the interviews, and they really did have choice. Obviously, we had some reasons to lean towards St. Andrews as a family. I would say the interviews can sound a little scary, but the folks in admissions at these secondary schools really do understand that they're dealing with, an 8th grade boy. They're very supportive, and I think St. Anne's prepares the kids well with these kinds of adult student interactions and public speaking. There are going to be more opportunities for preparation. I would say also just don't worry too much. Our St. Anne's kids do great with that. And if anyone has questions from my role as a high school teacher who has taught a lot of St. Anne's graduates, I've got plenty of encouragement for you there. Our kids are really well prepared and they're ready to thrive in any school they're headed to. So if you have questions along those lines, feel free to send them out.
Thank you, Gretchen. Okay, and okay, Laura, you have another question in here about the Smallwood boys, and I'm not sure that I know what the question is. So do you mind popping in and asking, and then Brian can answer that? Okay. Maybe I'll come back to that one. I'll come back to that one.
I couldn't unmic it for some reason. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I was just, I
Jill, I found it.
I think because I have three very different children, and hearing people talk about making it a very individualized experience, I just wanted to see if anybody has had, kids going off to, other choosing different schools from the other, because it's a complicated, becomes obviously a big complication. I think a follow-up question that I would have typed in, but is for any of the parents, did any parent explore or choose going the public route? And what was that like?
Okay, great. Brian, do you want to answer the very different, having different students, and then maybe Judith, you can answer the public. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, for us, Corey did actually choose to go to Sanford with Dylan. I think their processes were definitely a little bit different. Dylan seemed to want to explore a lot of different channels. We did look at St. George's. We looked at St. E's, St. Mark's. We did bounce around a lot with Dylan. Corey narrowed his process down pretty quick. He looked at Sanford and Tatnall. So it was definitely different, but I feel like that sibling bond might have been a part of that, but they did end up at Sanford together.
Okay, thank you. And Judith, do you mind popping in? Because where Jamie ended up, but you looked at a lot of different kinds of schools. You're muted, Judith. You're still muted.
There we go. Yes, Jameson was very specific in what she was looking for her high school experience, and the location of where she was looking. So we did look at a few boarding schools, and we looked at charter schools. We did look at Middletown for a little bit, but we really focused on the boarding and charter schools. And what I can say is, coming from St. Anne's, and that was our first experience going into the public school setting, attending charter schools. There was paperwork we had to fill out that I didn't know about, just enrolling the child into the public school setting. Also, there was numbers I didn't realize that she actually had ID numbers already set up in the public school setting. So when she got there, she was like, she learned everything that she needed. They were very supportive at MOT Charter. And St. Anne's prepared Jameson to be an independent learner. And that's what she wanted. She wanted sports. She wanted something close to home. She wanted to have a social life, but still participate in sports and not have to travel too far. Because wherever she was, she wanted to stay close to her school. So that's why she looked at boarding and she looked at the MOT Charter. She did not want to travel a very long distance. And she looked at the academics. MOT Charter met all her criterias. She loves the sports aspect, the fact that she can control her learning environment. Enjoyed, and even through this pandemic, she didn't miss a day of school. So that was something that I found interesting, because they switched automatically from in classroom to cyber. And it even shows in their marquee that now they say their cyber coursework. So she really drove that. She knew that she wanted academics, she wanted athletics, and she wanted to really have a social life close to her home. And it really fit. As I said, there is paperwork that she will have to fill out, and some different aspects in lunches, just daily life. And also, I would tell you to meet with a guidance counselor, because coming from a private school to a public, there are things that we as parents, we don't know, and they can help guide you in that key process. And I definitely reached out and set up a meeting with her guidance counselor, so I was able to really maneuver that process and feel comfortable with going this route, which I am now, very comfortable. Answer your question.
Great. Thank you, Judith. Okay. 2 notes before I go to the next question is someone made the suggestion in the chat. It was Danielle Cummings made a suggestion, really great suggestion. follow schools that you're interested in social media, and it gives you kind of an idea of the flavor for the kids to look. It's really good. It's good for parents and good for kids. Great suggestion, Danielle. And then she also reminded me, thank you, Danielle, for reminding me that we're going to be sharing a slide deck with you and with the 7th grade kid families, and maybe all families. Maybe I'll just include it in my letter on Tuesday. That will help you along the way. Kind of gives you milestones along the way for your search as a 7th grade family, or when you want a 7th grade family. Thanks, Danielle. Okay.
Hey, Jill,
Yep.
it's Matt, and I just wanted to address Lori's comment about having different children in different schools, and I put in the chat box, but I know Taylor could probably talk about that too. Although his kids ended up at the same school, he mentioned that his son started out at a day school, and so if they can talk offline about that if need be.
Okay. Okay, Taylor, do you feel like you need to say more about that? Because I think Lori's question had to do with kids who end up in different classes too. Also, there's that addition to that, and I'm not sure if we have anyone online here. Lori, I think that I can connect you with someone about that. But Taylor, do you feel like you want to add more to what you'd said?
I mean, not too much. They did end up at different schools initially. I can tell you that, it was good for our second child, Logan, to do that, to sort of make his own place and feel like he had his own place. And then eventually ended up at the same school. But I mean, it is a bit of a challenge sometimes managing those schedules and transportation and all that kind of stuff. I would imagine it would have been even more difficult if they were both at day schools. I mean, the fact that one was at a boarding school, that kind of day-to-day stuff is kind of not in your purview, as it were. But yeah, I mean, the fact that we sort of trusted them both to find their own places, they did find their own places, and it worked. It worked.
Right. I know that logistically that can be hard because it was quite the drive, right? And maybe that even became part of Logan's thing. Thank you, Matt, for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate it. And Lori, I hope that answers your question. And if not, then we can do something offline. Okay, Antamu's got a question here. It says, does St. Anne's provide SSAT prep classes? So thank you for that question. We do, in fact, what has been our typical practice at the beginning of the school year for our 8th graders is that our first session of electives, which is a little bit longer, offers SSAT prep. And it is the only elective session where we send out a note to parents that says, hey, we're offering SSAT prep. You might want to talk to your student about it, because typically with electives, we just send out a choice list to students, and they sign up. Not surprisingly, most of our 8th graders will sign up for SSAT prep, but every once in a while there's a student here who's like, yeah, I don't need to do that. I'll play infection outside in the woods. But we know that parents want to have a say in that. So it's the only one that we send out. Now, not knowing what next year will look like, we'll still keep that we'll keep that at the top of our list for planning for next year, to make sure that we are giving them that opportunity to have practice together. And that is something we've done over the last 3 years, I believe. And it's been real helpful to our students. I don't know, Shannon Cameron helped lead that this year. Do you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Not at all. So yes, Mrs. Bennett and I in the fall offer that first section, as Jill had mentioned. And basically we run kids through test-taking strategies. We show them sample questions. We direct them to online resources. And I will say that Friday afternoons can be challenging with 8th graders and test prep, but there are a lot of great online resources that we can direct them to for practice. And also, once we get into it a little bit, the kids are able to kind of choose whether they want to stay, work mostly in the math section or in the verbal section. And obviously, we try to meet their needs as best we can. but it's a nice way for us to try to talk to them about, like I said, test taking strategies and kind of reduce the anxiety. I would say that for some kids, they're going to need to take it perhaps multiple times. You might want to consider, once the testing sites are up and the dates are released, having them take it one time just to see how they do. And then they might need to take it again. Also, there are some online diagnostic tools that the kids can take and that will let them kind of focus in on areas of growth. And yeah, that's what Danielle just said. It's helpful to take a practice test. And then the last thing I would say about it is just, we're seeing this across the country regarding standardized testing. Please remember that it is just one tiny piece of the admissions profile. Actually, neither one of my kids were stellar test takers, and I was a little nervous about it. Really, all 3 times we went through the admissions process, first with Alex and the 2 times we went through it with Logan. But, you know, admissions counselors, as Gretchen mentioned before, they're trained. They know this is a tiny piece. The interviews, the teacher recommendations, you know, the letters that Mrs. Riley write and the school and the school, those are really where the schools get a picture of our kids. So I would urge you, while you can encourage your kids to practice, don't stress about it, and don't stress them about it.
Right. Right. Thank you, Shannon. And I would also add to that SSAT and SAT, you know, while they're closed right now, they do have dates up for testing dates for next year. St. Anne's is a testing site, which is something we added a couple years ago, which is really nice for our own students, because we know that students test better when they're in a familiar environment. So with someone that they know. So that is one of the reasons we added that a couple years ago. And that's a real benefit to your kids. So I want to echo what Shannon said about that. We have, you know, your kids the best, and but we know them also really well in addition to you knowing them. And sometimes it can be, we have to watch how much anxiety they feel for how they feel about test taking. So while we don't tell them it's unimportant, because they know it's important, we do want to help them find a balance, and all the pieces that we put in place are helping that move through. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. Next question's from Jenny Randolph. It says, what role is appropriate to expect our children to play in the application process? What is a good balance of proofing the writing that may be required in applications? So do any of my 5 like to speak to that? Gretchen, do you mind? Do you want to speak to that? I'm judging by people's frozen faces in some cases, so I'm not sure.
Sure. I think that, you know, the schools really want to have, you know, obviously a genuine writing sample from the students. And so parents can help prompt the kids' thinking, maybe ask, you know, have them talk through their ideas. But, you know, they really should be writing it. And then I think, you know, having the student print it out and proofread themselves, parents tend to like to make sure, you know, all those commas are in, and maybe like Heather Daly can weigh in on that, on how much parent involvement in proofreading, et cetera. But the idea is that it should be their voice and their thoughts, and maybe they have a little fun with it. I was apprehensive about sort of getting my adolescent boys to sit down and write something, and it turned out most of the applications, they were pretty doable. They were not too demanding, and St. Anne's kids have had a lot of practice with this kind of reflective or personal writing.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay. Matt Scotty asks, are there any specific financial aid options, grants or scholarships or anything like that for any of these schools? Do I have any folks? I don't know. Danielle, you have a frozen, but I'm hoping I can hear you, or Brian, or anybody want to speak to that before I do?
I would say, this is Taylor.
Perfect.
I would say that outside of the schools themselves, there's all kinds of things you can avail yourself of in terms of local Rotary clubs. And I mean, there's lots of service organizations that offer financial aid and scholarships and that kind of thing. So those are there's a whole universe of that. I would say within the individual schools, each school is going to have its own capacity for financial aid and its own strategy and that kind of thing. And just know that it's a conversation. A lot of these schools, if they don't want kids and families who they want to go there to not attend, if that's the only reason. If it's just a financial reason, they will work with you. They will try and work with you. So, be open and honest and have an open conversation with the financial aid folks at the school, because if it's a great fit, they want to make it work. Don't let that be the reason why your kid doesn't go.
And Danielle, did you want to add to that?
I would echo everything that he said, as well as adding that you need to really look at the website of the schools your child chooses, because in the application process, many of the scholarships that are available, be it art or drama or academic, are not necessarily advertised in the application process, but there is a section on all of the websites that will go over all of the different options. And that's also something you have to take into consideration with this process, because you're going to have the initial look, you're going to have the shadow days, and then you're going to have applications, but then you have to add into that it's not just applications. My daughter applied to 6 schools, 3 boarding, 3 day schools, and for 5 of the 6, she applied for leadership scholarships or merit scholarships. It's a lot of extra work. So you may choose not to, depending on where that lies. But there's so many options out there, and it's absolutely a conversation. And it's the other thing I want to say is there's some joy in the process. There's some joy to really learn about your child. You think you know them 100%, but you find in these little mini essays that they write, or these things they're really telling the schools that they're interested in, that there are these little facets of them that you just were like, oh, that's a surprise, but it's a joy to go through the process with them.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. In the chat box, I've noticed, thank you, Heather Daly. I did not know this, so I've just learned something. She said SSAT has also just introduced an at-home test option. So thank you for sharing that information with us all. Thank you. Do we have other questions? We're at 9:40 right now, and I'm respectful of people's time. We can stay for a little bit and answer some more questions. I don't know, maybe we have a final thought from each of our 5 contributors today. And let's go in backwards order this time. We'll start with Taylor Cameron and then work our way back, okay?
Yeah, I would sort of build off with what Danielle just said. We have we're fortunate in this area that we have such a great selection of public, charter, day, boarding schools. So take some great, joy in this process. It's hard, but it can be a lot of fun. Your sons and daughters are going to get into a school. They're going to get into a good school. So know at the end of this process, it's good. It will be successful, and enjoy the success of it. Allow them to sort of enjoy that, that achievement, because it is. I mean, they've worked really hard at St. Anne's and done some great work there, and allow them to enjoy that sort of, victory lap when they do get in, wherever they get in. Go to the visit back day, even if you're going to go there. Go to that visit back day if you can, and let them soak that up, because it's they've earned it.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
What I can say is, yes, there's a lot of joy, and really, it's a time for your child to find their own voice, So allow them that sense of independence where they control their future and their destiny. So just let them start growing into these young individuals that we want them to become, and trust their abilities. They're going to make the right choice. They truly will make the right choice.
Thanks, Judith. Okay, Danielle.
Just real quick, the child drives the process or the experience. The parent drives the process, and enjoy the process because it's a lot of fun. Oh, and we're always here to help. St. Anne's is always here to help.
Yeah. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, just to reiterate, excuse me, to start early, and don't narrow the choices down too quickly. Give your child enough time to look around at as many schools as possible.
Great, thanks, Brian. And then finally, Gretchen.
I love all this advice and echo most of what's already been said. Do know that your student will thrive wherever they land. That is for sure. They're ready to go. So I hope parents stay open to the whole process, and like many are saying, maybe take some joy in it and let those kids find their voice. The last piece I would say is to keep enjoying St. Anne's. While you're going through this process, you get so excited, you're thinking about next steps. Sometimes it feels like your kids have one or both feet already in the next school. And I would say soak up the St. Anne's moments, just and really encourage your students to also appreciate their friends, their classes, everything around them at St. Anne's while they think about the next step too.
Okay. Thank you, Gretchen. All right. I think that about wraps us up. This recording will be on the website if you want to go back and get some more information. I'll be sharing the resources that I mentioned here and a few pieces of the really good advice in my letter on Tuesday. And I hope this was helpful to you, and have a great weekend.